Hi there, welcome to Lilly-Tree. Today we're making these wire-wrapped earrings. So let's get wrapping. For this project we need 1mm diameter wire, which is 18 gauge, 0.4mm diameter wire, which is 26 gauge, 2 beads, about 6mm diameter, and 2 ear hooks. And the tools we need are flat nose or chain nose pliers, round nose pliers, and wire cutters. To shape the frame, we need 2 pieces of the 1mm diameter or 18 gauge wire, about 15 centimetres long, one for each earring. And we'll start by adding the bead to that wire. Make sure it's about in the centre, and carefully bend the wire just a little way from the bead. We'll bend the other side in the opposite direction. And we can use our flat nose or chain nose pliers to help with this. Ideally, we just want a little bit of room for that bead to move. We're then going to take one of those sides and curve it around to create a small loop at the top of the bead. We want this to come down to touch the wire of the other side. And then we can do the same with the other side. We want these sides to be about the same, and the curve to have just a little bit of space between the wire and the bead. So we can use the flat nose pliers just to help shape that around. And it's worth taking the time to get this right. And make a shape that you're happy with. And we'll shape the wire for the other earring in exactly the same way. And at this point you can make them exactly the same. Then we can flip it over to create the mirror image. Now we can continue forming the spiral on both sides. So we'll just bend that wire around, and from here we want to gradually open out that spiral. We'll bend the other side in the same way. And we want these to be about the same. And then we can use the flat nose pliers or chain nose pliers just to finesse that curve a little. Until we're happy with the shape. Now at this point, if the wire is so soft you're worried that it won't hold its shape, you can hammer it a little just to help work harden it. And then we want to shape the other earring in the same way. And we're ready to start wire wrapping. For the wire wrapping, we want about 1.5 meters of the 0.4mm or 26 gauge wire. We can put the end in between those 2 inner wires, just where one's coming out from the bead, and then wrap that end 3 times around the wire that's coming out of the bead. And we just need to make sure that bead's central. And then we can take the weaving wire through between those 2 frame wires and over that outer wire, and we'll wrap that 3 times. Then we can come back between the 2 wires again, and I find it easier to find the path through where the frame wires are open. And wrap that inner wire 2 times. You just need to be a bit careful at this point to keep that tail of wire out of the way. Then we can take the weaving wire between the 2 frame wires again and wrap 3 times on that outer wire. And now we've got the wrap started, we can just make sure that end's tight and trim the end of that wire so it's not in the way anymore. And from here we're basically wrapping around a curve. When I'm doing this, I quite like to keep the wraps on the inner wire even. So in this case, I'll just keep wrapping 2 times on that inner wire. And then make enough wraps on the outer wire to keep up where the weaves are. And you can check this by making sure that when you're moving between the 2 frame wires, the weaving wire is going basically in the direction of the centre of the bead. If you want to know more about weaving round a curve, I've got a free PDF that goes into more detail. I'll leave a link in the card above and in the description below. Because we want these 2 sides to be the same, it's worth keeping a note of the number of wraps you're putting on each time. And then you can just follow that for the other side and for the other earring. So I started off with 3 wraps on the outer wire and then increased it to 4 for a couple of times. Then wrap 5 times around the outer wire. And I'm just increasing it by 1 wrap each time, just where it's sensible to do so. And we'll just continue putting 2 wraps on the inner wire and then however many wraps we need on the outer wire, until we're almost where we meet the wire coming out of the other side of the bead. And just make sure that the spiral's the shape that you want it as you go. You could have it a little tighter than mine or open it out a bit. It's entirely up to you. So I've gotten up to 7 wraps on the outer wire, and I've actually done that a few times without needing to increase it again. But now we've just got a little bit of space left on the inner wire. So we'll take the weaving wire over to that inner wire and just wrap 3 more times. And then we want to take the weaving wire over to start the wrapping on the other side. And I'm going to take it through, so I've got 1 wrap that's quite tight to the bead. And just make sure that weaving wire is sitting neatly on the back. And then this wrap can go through the bottom gap. And then we can thread it through that top space and wrap 2 more wraps on that inner wire. And at this point we have to thread the wire through that small space by the bead, but just be careful not to kink the wire. Then we can take the weaving wire between those 2 frame wires, wrap 3 times on the outer wire, then between the 2 frame wires again, and wrap twice on that inner wire. And then we'll just continue weaving around the curve in exactly the same way as we did the first half. So we'll keep the 2 wraps on the inner wire and use the same sequence of wraps on the outer wire as we've just done the other side. So for me, I'm wrapping 3 times on that outer wire twice, and then 4 times twice, and then continue increasing exactly as I did before, up to the final 7 wraps. And at this point, space on that inner wire is going to be quite tight. So we just want to carefully take that weaving wire through and wrap a final 3 times on the inner wire. Just go slowly with this and make sure those wraps are all sitting alongside each other and aren't sitting on top of each other. Then we can trim off the weaving wire and just make sure it's sitting tightly and won't catch. And we need to weave the other earring in exactly the same way, using the same sequence of wraps on the outer wire as we've done for the first earring. Then we can trim those frame wires. Use our round nose pliers to make a small loop in each end. Add on the ear hooks. And our earrings are finished. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, why not head to this playlist for more like it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.